Hi, and welcome to the next episode of ID Cyber Sessions. I'm Steve, and this is Alice, and we both work at ID Cyber.
Today we are speaking with Elizabeth Momola, who is the Information Security Manager at SGN. Welcome, Elizabeth. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you. So until a few years ago, you worked in admin. What inspired you to change industries and jump to cybersecurity?
So I worked in the public sector as a business support administrator, and my job wasn't stable. I was working on a fixed term contract, which was basically extended every 3 to 6 months. And at that time, I had a young family, mortgage, financial obligations. And I thought that to really have that peace of mind and be able to plan summer holidays a year ahead, I need a job that's more stable, and I need to change to an industry where I'll know that there is a need for specialists. Within the administration, a lot of jobs are actually replaced with automation, with different software and products. So my natural thought was to go into cyber. And cybersecurity was a choice due to the fact that I was working a lot with GDPR, and I thought, well, data protection, cybersecurity, I can take some of my soft skills and translate it into that. So that's how I ended up deciding that I want to go into cybersecurity.
Yeah, because often soft skills are sometimes really important in any industry, so it's a transferable, something that's transferable to, obviously,
Yeah,
a new role.
I wasn't that confident at the time. I did have a lot of little voices in my head saying, you're too old for the transition, because I was in my 30s. And I had small kids, and I thought, how much effort will it cost me? I did realize that I'll have to learn a lot, and I'll have to spend a lot of my personal time developing these skills. And I did see it at the time as a huge disadvantage that I don't have the technical knowledge. And I wasn't sure how much of the
Yeah.
soft skills would be transferable, how much would they be useful for the new role. So I was terrified at the time. I was thinking of, if I transfer, will I have a job? How well will I be able to find an employer who will want someone who's, in their 30s and wants to go back and learn from scratch to requalify. So it was a very terrifying decision. But at the end, I knew that if I want to transfer, I can't just, spend 2 3 hours a week trying to research and to read or do courses.
Yeah.
I have to fully jump in. So whatever I'm learning in my free time, I can actually apply in the workplace.
Yeah, I think it's important to know that we all have those voices. It's not just, if you think, oh, I'm the only one that's had those voices. No, everyone has those voices. And so you started out as a graduate apprentice. So can you give us a rundown of what a graduate apprenticeship is?
Yeah, so there are two different types of apprenticeships. There's a modern apprenticeship and there's a graduate apprenticeship. And at the time when I was looking to transfer into cyber, I didn't realize that there's these two different types of apprenticeship. Initially, I was looking for a junior role, hoping that there would be a company that would be willing to take on someone without any experience and to train them. But I wasn't able to find any roles accepting people without any prior experience or knowledge or a university degree on popular job sites like S1 Jobs or LinkedIn or anywhere like that. So just by chance, by googling, entry level position in cyber, I came across Skills Development Scotland website, which had the graduate apprenticeship and modern apprenticeship roles. I initially applied for a modern apprenticeship, not knowing that there's an age limit for that. And I believe that modern apprenticeship is more linked to college courses that you do alongside working in a workplace. For a graduate apprenticeship, the idea is that you work in the field that you want to achieve a degree in. And at the same time, you're doing a university degree where you're not doing all the modules as full-time students, because there's the concept that you're actually gaining skills and relevant industry knowledge in your workspace. So you don't need to complete all the modules as full-time students do. And in replace of that, there are modules like work-based practice, where you have to document the skills and the projects that you worked on in your workplace and how it helped you develop your skill set. and reflect on the challenges that you had or areas that you still feel you need to learn more or develop into.
That sounds like a really good opportunity to just really blend that kind of real life work experience alongside learning. So I'm imagining that they probably have a lot of applicants for these sort of roles. Did you find it difficult to get into this type of role? How was the application process?
So it depends, because for the graduate apprenticeship, you have courses in different areas, not just cyber. You have software development, business administration, engineering. Depending on what company and what salary they offer, you'll have a different number of applicants trying to get the role. Surprisingly, at the time when I was applying, there was only one role for cyber that was advertised through Skills Development Scotland. And the people that I was studying with at the time were people who already had jobs within cyber, but wanted to upskill. So their employers decided to send them for the graduate apprenticeship course in order for them to gain a university degree in the relevant area. But they already had jobs. It was just the employer that was actually sending them off to upskill through a university course. So there weren't many jobs. And I think that for the job that I was applying, there was maybe only 5 applicants that went through to the interview stage for my role. But I know that for software development apprenticeships, there's way more applicants for a single position.
That's surprising, actually. I'd have thought that, cyber, that people would be like, yeah, let's jump into cyber. Maybe it's the fact that people don't know that these things exist. So it's probably good that we're
having this
that.
discussion.
So are there many graduate apprenticeship schemes out there?
Yes, there's the graduate apprenticeship skills look a little bit different in Scotland than they do in England, purely because the fees for university look different between the two areas. There's a number of universities that support graduate apprenticeship programs because the modules that consist of that program are slightly different. And the structure of the learning is slightly different. But in Edinburgh, you have Edinburgh Napier University, there's Glasgow Caledonian University. I believe that University in Dundee also supports graduate apprenticeship programs. And I believe that if an employer would get in touch with Skills Development Scotland, they would easily give them information around which universities support the program and what sort of courses do they have available for graduate apprenticeship.
That's excellent. It sounds accessible as well. So why should an employer consider, setting up a graduate apprenticeship?
A number of reasons. Cheap labor. I know it sounds really bad, but being a student, opportunity to study and at the same time earn and gain industry relevant experience is priceless.
Mm-hmm.
There have been a number of people that I interviewed as part of my job for security roles who just finished university and they were terrified because they didn't have any sort of experience within the industry. So you're basically allowing people to come learn about your company, learn about your processes from the start, develop the skills, and then allow them to jump into senior positions with that tailored knowledge that applies to your company, which is amazing. The cost of keeping an apprentice is made way lower than getting a graduate who already finished a university. And from my experience, people who tend to go for the graduate apprenticeship program, they're really hardworking people. They appreciate the fact that they'll have to take up their personal time to keep learning and develop those new skills. Doing university and learning at the same time requires a lot of juggling of responsibilities and prioritizing. So you have very ambitious people who want to prove themselves and want to achieve something amazing. So that when you're taking someone who wants to take on both that level of responsibility, that they'll work really hard to achieve that.
I was actually going to ask about that kind of juggling work and study. How did you find that balance? Like, was your employer supportive? Did they appreciate that you would have to juggle both things? How did you personally find it?
I'll be honest, there's no such thing as balance. It's in my case very much chaos. And whenever I was in my second year of graduate apprenticeship, COVID hit, and from
course,
a
yeah.
mental health perspective, it took a really huge toll on me. I have two kids who were school age, so I had to do homeschooling while working from home, while studying from home. And suddenly the flat that is quite spacious seemed to be very small and crowded, and you had that claustrophobic feeling of I can't breathe. Um, I've been through 3 different employers, and each of my employer has been extremely supportive and understanding, and I've been very lucky in that respect. But I've learned through the hard way that I can't always have it all. So sometimes I have to give up some things in order to focus on something else. And I have a really understanding family. My kids are absolutely amazing. Whenever COVID hit and I had to turn one of the rooms to my home office, they even did signs for my door. So whenever I'm on a meeting, I can put up the sign to say "Mommy's working," and they just know that they can't come in. I'm really lucky in that respect. But for the very intense periods where, for example, incidents happen and I have to be on a call, or whenever it's exam season and I have to focus on learning, I sometimes completely withdraw from social life, and I completely focus on that, because I know I can't achieve everything at the same time. I can't be an amazing friend who comes to every event. I can't be the mom that takes the kids for walks every day. I have to decide which I want to focus on in order to achieve in that area.
Yeah, it's finding your own priorities, basically. It's finding your own balance.
Yes, exactly. And it's difficult, but as long as you accept that you can't do everything at the same time, the pressure sort of falls down. So sometimes, if I feel that I actually need to spend more time with my family, I'll deprioritize university, and I'll be like, it's fine. I just want to pass for this module. I know it sounds bad. I hope that my lecturers will listen to it and be like, that's
We've
why
all
she
been
got a
there.
bad
We've all
mark.
been there. We just want to get through it.
Exactly. But it's important to also understand what's important for you, because at university, there's a number of modules. Some of the modules are something that you might be interested in, while the others are something that you think, I'll never be doing this, or I'll never need that. So as long as you understand what are your priorities, it's important to focus on that, and not be worried about what others think, I think.
I think it's about just having that open conversation, isn't it? Having that open communication with whoever those people are, and just in your life. So it's a case of, I might not be at this thing, or I might not be able to do this bit, or it's a case of just making your own priorities and making it work for you, and just having open communication. That's what I've found as well. So during your transition, you used some free resources like Free Code Camp and Code Academy. Did you find, was that part of your university, or was that something you did off your own back in terms of just went
No,
looking for things?
that's something that I did off my own back. So whenever I was still the business support administrator, I was looking to move into cyber, but initially I was looking more at software development, because I thought that would be a role that I would be able to do from home instead of going to an office, because I had few people, friends who were working in the industry, and I sort of had an idea of how their work-life balance looks like. So I used Free Code Camp because that's what few people recommended to me, and it was beneficial in a way that I could go at my own pace. At the time I was working full-time, so I would do, say, 2-3 hours a week and do a few modules. And it's from a perspective of where I am right now, it was really good to learn how to read code and how to write code, because effectively as a blue teamer, you do have to look at logs, you do have to look at, say, PowerShell code, and you need to understand what it does. You don't necessarily have to know how to write it. You don't necessarily have to know how to write a malicious script, but it's really helpful to understand what a script does in order to determine if it's malicious or not. So those were things that I've been doing in my own time. But because I was working full-time in a completely different industry, I found that if I had a bigger break between that learning, I would fall behind. So I would have to go back to the modules to remind myself, okay, so what does this script do? How do I call this function? And I just felt at times that I took one step forward and then two steps back. So that's why I thought I need to actually work in the field so I can take that knowledge, even the one that I learned in my free time, and just apply it straight in the workplace, because that way it would melt into my brain and I would remember it.
You mentioned actually just there about the fact you work in the blue team side of things, and actually your career so far has been very focused on that. First as a kind of analyst role, and now is the more managerial side, but still within blue team. Do you think that you'll stay within the blue team, or are there other areas of cybersecurity that you're interested in exploring? Basically, where do you see your career heading over the next few years?
I hate that question. I'm at a stage where I take one day at a time or 1 month at a time. I'm in my final university year, and all of my focus is on just pushing through that last month and getting the degree. Whenever I was working in the SOC, I really enjoyed helping out with the incident response. And that purple team, where you're looking at protecting, but also looking at how attacks are being conducted and how to use that knowledge to defend, is something really appealing to me. So I'm hoping to develop more in that area, more within incident response and forensic analysis, while still thinking of how to take that knowledge and how to apply it when protecting an organization. I feel that it's almost, you can't have one without the other. You can't protect without understanding how you'll be attacked and who wants to attack you. So that's my main focus. I recently moved to a company that is a critical national infrastructure. So my focus with regards to learning is around OT and OT security, which is extremely fascinating. And it just seems that there's so much to learn, and there's so much.
It's a different world,
completely
isn't it?
different world compared to IT security. So I feel that for the next few years, I won't give a number, but for the next few years, that will be my main focus until I feel that, okay, I feel I've learned enough in this area. Do I want to continue, or do I want to sort of slightly maneuver to a different site to gain new skills?
So, so you've successfully transitioned now, and you're now in a management role. You know, you've went through the SOC, you've went through learning all the cybersecurity stuff, and you're now within a management position. What advice do you have for anyone thinking of changing industry into cybersecurity?
Well, the first advice would be stop listening to the voices in your head, and that's purely based on my experience. It is terrifying to change careers in general. It doesn't matter if you want to go to cyber or to any other industry. Soft skills are really important. It may seem at times that people all around you are extremely technical, and you might think that soft skills aren't that important, but they are. Communicating stuff, being able to work with others as part of a team, being able to share knowledge, that is extremely important in cyber. And I think it's maybe underappreciated by people who are coming into cyber. And the other thing is that my way was to go through a university because I wanted to earn and learn, and I wanted a little bit of structure that a university course gives you. But there's other ways of getting into the industry. I know people who came from nursing into cyber, and they didn't go through a full university course, but they went through the path of doing certificates. Mm-hmm. The most challenging bit, I think, is finding a company that would be willing to take on someone who doesn't have the experience or doesn't have the university degree. I feel that there's still a bit of a misconcept that you need to have a university degree to do your job. That's not the case. You can get a lot of relevant, good experience, really industry focused from different courses. And there's also, initiatives like Try Hack Me or Hack the Box, where you can actually go and put red teaming skills or purple teaming skills into practice and achieve badges similar to Free Code Camp. And that really shows that someone is willing to take their own time to go through this, to learn this. So from an employer perspective, if you see someone who's that determined, who doesn't necessarily have a university degree, but is willing to take their personal time to gain these skills, that is a awesome person. Look at this person, think of them as a potential candidate for the role. And last advice is, I wasn't aware of this whenever I found out about the graduate apprenticeship program, but there's a massive cyber community out there, and there's loads of people that are just willing to share their knowledge, to mentor you, to guide you, to give you advice. It doesn't necessarily have to be advice about your job. You can sometimes just have a person to rant on about, how difficult it is, or, how challenging some things are for you to balance out. But there's a number of conferences where you can go and meet potential employers or find mentors. You can learn a lot from the talks that people give. You can learn about other sides of cyber that you maybe aren't exposed in your role, or you haven't been aware of. Consulting, incident response, pen testing. You'll have in one conference so many different specialists talking about what they do or what they find fascinating. And it might be that just in that conference, you'll sit down, listen to someone and be like, I want to do that. Or I didn't know that something like that existed. So going to conferences is such an amazing way to get into cyber, to meet people, to get guidance, to find tips on what's out there, what to use, what courses to go on. I can't recommend it enough. And there's so many amazing conferences like SteelCon, like Security, like Latour de Hack. There's different B-sides conferences running, and small DEFCON groups that run in different cities. So there's loads and loads of opportunities. But I think that whenever you're just looking to move into cyber and you don't know someone who already works in cyber, you just might not know that it's out there. But it's there for the grabs. It's free. You can go. You can watch the videos from those conferences and just learn so much by listening to others.
I think that me and Alice can both attest to that, because Alice had never been to cybersecurity conferences last year. I hadn't been to a security conference till earlier on this year, and I think I've become a security conference junkie now. I think I've been to 3 or 4 this year, and I've got more planned for later on in the year as well. So I've met some amazing people, and I would recommend it to anyone to go and just meet the community that's out there.
Yeah, it's eye-opening.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
I've been even advising recruitment agencies, people who work in recruitment, to go to these conferences if they're recruiting for cyber positions, to understand more about the industry and what people do and cultures that companies have. So yeah, anyone can go. You don't have to be highly technical. The levels of talks are at different heights. So you can go to a very simple talk, general, about cyber. Sometimes there's talks about, just coping and mental health and raising awareness about that. And you do have very technical workshops or talks. So you can tailor that. You can decide what you want to listen to. There's usually multiple tracks running on that conference. So you can cherry pick what you want to listen to, what you want to learn.
And even if you're not going to a talk, then you can go and speak at the sponsor stalls and find out what their companies are around. And it really is, it's an amazing opportunity. Just one final question. Is there a podcast or a book or a blog that you'd recommend that people check out, whether cybersecurity related or not, or even a person that you'd recommend giving a follow on social media that you found particularly inspirational, I guess?
So as I said, cyber conferences are an extra way to listen to different people from the industry, more or less advanced in what they do. But podcasts like Darknet Diaries, I have it on my phone, and even when I'm working, it's playing in the background, and I absolutely love it. That the way that it's presented is very accessible and easy to digest. But I'll go with something less conventional. There's a book that I really like, which is based on true experience. It's a little bit, might turn into a dark side, but it's written by a person who survived Second World War and survived living in the Warsaw Ghetto. And it's written by Mark Edelman. He's been an amazing inspiration for me. Whenever there's difficult times in my life, I refer to that book as almost a mantra of how much people can survive. And whenever you're in a very difficult situation, there's this survival skills in you that allow you to push through. And if people who are listening haven't read any of Mark's short stories, I highly recommend it. It definitely gives a perspective to the problems that you might be facing. You're reading through what people went through during Second World War, and you're thinking, okay, the problems that I'm facing right now, it's nothing. I can do this. I can survive this. So that would be my recommendation for people who are sometimes struggling with stress, struggling with amount of workload and with responsibilities, and sometimes even I lose focus on what's important in life. So that's a book that I can recommend.
That's an excellent one. I think I'm definitely going to check that one out. So I'd just like to thank Elizabeth for sharing her thoughts today on transitioning into cyber. If you want to find out what we do here at ID Cyber Solutions, you can get us idcybersolutions.com, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.